Hey there and welcome to That Bond Show, a That Nerdy Site show and the internet's #1 James Bond rewatch show hosted by two guys named Logan and Trevor. Probably. Join us as each week we dive into a new Bond movie from Dr. No to No Time to Die. I am one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson, and joining me, as always, is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Can't you just say hello like a normal person? See, that one works as a double.
It works so good. It's very
there,
good, yeah.
And a segue for the intro.
Absolutely. Also joining us this week is super special Aussie guest, Jono Pech. Jono, how you doing?
Jono Pech. I'm good. Happy to be here.
Absolutely, yes. It's very excited to have you on. We originally were going to have you on a couple weeks ago, but I'm just happy to have you on anytime we can get you on anything. We, this week, are talking about The World Is Not Enough, the 19th James Bond film, which was released in November 8th of 1999. Typically, we kind of run through our memories and experiences with the film. We'll start with you, Jono. What are your kind of memories or connection with The World Is Not Enough, if you have one?
Yeah, so as we'll get to a little bit later, I was in 1999. I was in grade 6, as we call it here, the last year of primary school before moving to what we call high school. Mm-hmm. And this was like the summer blockbuster for us because, you know, upside down world we live in. And, so I was, on the cusp of becoming a teenager. So, you know, this was a very exciting kind of movie for someone that age, and coming hot off the press from, I guess, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, which from like a kind of blockbustery popcorn kind of flick perspective felt like a peak for Bond in my young lifetime. Like, obviously, I wasn't there for Lazenby and for Connery and all that, but it was like, explosions and pretty women and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So as much as it might not hold up so well in the very broader sense of cinema and James Bond, it was exciting, and I definitely went to see it at the cinema, and you know, it was GoldenEye was the hottest thing on the Nintendo 64 around this period. So it was just a fun time, and I feel like it was probably... I knew that it wasn't as good as the other movies before this, but you know, it's there's a lot going on, as we'll get to. Yes. It's very flashy, and I definitely had a fun time at the cinema. But I don't know if my grandfather, who I went with, or my dad enjoyed it as much as I did.
Sure. I think that's fair. Trevor, your thoughts and memories with The World Is Not Enough?
Yeah, like we were talking about right before we started recording, this would have been my freshman year of high school. And I definitely, as with like the last couple, I probably went and saw this with like my group of friends that played GoldenEye and stuff. Because, you know, that was prime age for that kind of stuff. And certainly as like, you know, that era of like MTV Kids and stuff, like the Denise Richards was probably a significant selling point that now I just look back on. I'm like, that was dumb. Why did they sell things to horny, stupid 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds? I remember, like, when we were leading up to this one, I remember the thing I remembered most beyond like, oh, Denise Richards is in that one and she's unbelievably terrible, was how cool I thought the idea of Reynard was. The idea of this villain who can't feel anything because like a bullet has been lodged in his brain and his like has taken away his pain sensors, and just like what that would do to a person. I just remember like thinking that was a really cool like element of this movie that like, now looking back, it's like, oh, like that's, I mean, it's a part of this movie, but like he's
a trope now.
Yeah. It certainly, it's a trope more so now, but also just even like in this movie, he doesn't really have a ton to do. He's much more in the camp of like, you know, almost silent antagonist, kind of like big bad henchman, as we've seen with a lot of the others. But like, it was just something about like that backstory, like I thought was really cool, in 1999.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's totally fair, right? I mean, as we'll get to later on, I was 7, almost 8 when this movie came out, right? Like, this is possibly the first Bond movie I ever saw in a movie theater. Again, my memory, if it was this or Die Another Day, is a little fuzzy, but certainly, like, this was the moment, like, this movie, like, 99, like, when I really started going full board James Bond, right? Like, I watched my first Bond movie when I was 5, but obviously I didn't see Tomorrow Never Dies in the theater because I was a 5-year-old. But this one was like when, I'd had GoldenEye Tomorrow Never Dies come out. I had all my dad's VHS copies of The Connery and more movies I'd watched by this point in time. And I'd had the GoldenEye video game as well. And so, like, by the time The War's Not Enough came out, I was super into it, super excited about the movie. I talked a little bit, I think last week, maybe off air with Trevor, about the fact that I am maybe fortunate in the fact that, like, I was 7, so Denise Richards did nothing for me at the time. And so, like, I missed, like, the nostalgic love of, oh, like, that was a first crush kind of thing. It was just like, oh, she's not good in this movie, even as a child, right? And so that way, I feel like I'm kind of fortunate because I've seen some reviews. Roger Ebert apparently liked Denise Richards, so that's a swing and a miss on that one, Roger. Yeah, like, I always remembered this movie being a ton of fun and kind of silly and ridiculous. And I think, as we'll get into later on, I think that is still there, but there are more issues I have with this movie in terms of, I think this would sort of set the lasting trend for how people remember Pierce Brosnan and his era of Bond, maybe unfairly compared to kind of his first 2 movies. But we will get to that later. Before we do that, let's run through the cast and crew. Speaking of, we of course have Pierce Brosnan back as James Bond 007 for the 3rd time now. 3rd Bond movie in 5 years. They're cranking them out here at this point in time. We've got Sophie Marceau as Electra King, Robert Carlyle as Renard, just 1D. Denise Richards as Dr. Christmas Jones. Can't forget that doctor. Robbie Coltrane is back as Valentin Sokovsky. My personal favorite one, because I had never realized this was his actual name, Goldie as the Bull.
That's that's even one that's weird because that's what he's like credited as. But like in the movie, they call him Bullion, and like that seems to be like what his name is. So yeah, they just couldn't come up with, or maybe they were like, stupid American audiences aren't going to know what Bullion
I'm sure
is.
They're not going to get that.
Yeah.
Colin Salmon is back as Charles Robinson. Michael Kitchen is back as Bill Tanner. Samantha Bond is Moneypenny. John Cleese makes his introduction as R. Judi Dench is M. And Desmond Llewellyn makes his final appearance as Q. And the movie was directed by Michael Apted. In the Blast from the Past section, the president was still Bill Clinton, the prime minister was still Tony Blair, and a special Aussie shout out to Australian Prime Minister John Howard. I got you covered here, Jono. In the Logan and Trevor watch, Trevor was 14, I was 7, and Jono was 12, as we've alluded to. And the highest grossing movie of 1999 was Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Star Wars yet again being the box office champ in its given years. And in my favorite recurrent section of what were the Celtics doing, the Celtics won 19 games, which was still better than the Bulls in their first Last Dance MJ season, who won just 13 games that season.
Terrible.
It was rough. In the trivia section, speaking of, Desmond Llewellyn would tragically pass away just weeks after the film's release in a car accident. Llewellyn had appeared in 17 James Bond movies in the series, a record for anyone involved in the series, either in front of or behind the camera. His time with the character would last from 1963 through 1999, a 36-year stretch. There is a lovely tribute to the actor that's been included in every release of the film and can be found in the bonus features of it to this day. I watched it after watching the movie. It is very, very nice. Desmond Llewellyn is obviously an iconic part of the series. And we will get into his little scene, which I found really lovely in the movie later on. Speaking of director Michael Apted, he is best known for his work as the director and producer of the landmark and long-running British documentary series 7 Up. The documentary series checks in every 7 years on a group of British children first selected in 1964, providing updates every 7 years on their lives and careers. I think the last one was in like 2015-16. Michael Apted passed away a couple years ago, so I don't know if it's going to continue now that he's passed away. And the children themselves are obviously now in their 60s at the very least. But yes,
imagine someone rolling up to your house every 7 years with camera crew.
It's an incredible, it's an incredible thing, right? Because the whole point is that they were 7 years old for the first one in 64, and just these periodic updates. There are kids adults who over the years will like kind of not make an appearance in like 14 or 21 or 28 up. And then come back a few years later or just leave altogether because of like issues with the production team. But for every 7 years, they're all doing their own things. It is really in a lot of ways less a documentary and more like a giant social experiment. But it is incredible viewing. The scene in which James Bond grabs the cables on the Millennium Dome required extraordinarily difficult stunt work. Director Michael Apted intentionally left a shot of one of the stuntmen missing a cable he was attempting to grab in the final cut. He did this in order to highlight how difficult the scene had been to film and as an honor to the stunt performers who worked on the movie. I always thought that scene was really strange, but it makes more sense now. In the Scottish headquarters castle, a portrait of Bernard Lee, the original M, hangs behind the current M's desk. This will start a trend of having Bernard Lee and eventually Robert Brown, M's portraits in MI6, either the headquarter or adjacent properties. The boat chase took 7 weeks to shoot as the River Thames 9-mile-per-hour boat speed limit had to be factored in. The filming of the boat chase sequence was broadcast live over the internet via webcam set up at certain points over the river, so a little bit like Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. The scene was not originally intended to be part of the opening sequence until test audiences said that the jump from the window opener was anticlimactic. It was. As such, it was brought forward and had to be shortened. As it is now, the 14 to 15 minute opener is one of the longest pre-credit sequence in a James Bond movie. It was the longest for 22 years until No Time to Die, which clocked in at over 20 minutes. And for some extra special homework, I watched the deleted scenes of the boat chase that basically included more shit in MI6 and then all the extra boat chase stuff. It is definitely longer. I can confirm that. I think they were probably better off to shorten that. It is a lot of boat chase. This is the final James Bond movie released under the United Artists banner, starting with Die Another Day. They'd all be under the MGM banner, and not United Artists. Finally, The World Is Not Enough is one of the lowest reviewed and well-received films in the entire series history. It has the 4th lowest Rotten Tomatoes score, was ranked as the worst Bond movie ever by Entertainment Weekly, the 3rd worst ever by MSN, and the 5th worst by IGN. Finally, in Screen Rant's ranking of the 25 Bond films after the release of No Time to Die, The World Is Not Enough came in next to last, only above Die Another Day. The movie is not that bad. Man with the Golden Gun exists.
I mean, I would say all of the Moore era exists.
Pretty much all of the Moore era exists. But yes, it would start the trend, I think, of leaving a bad taste in people's mouth for the Brosnan era unfairly. That takes us to the 0070-second recap. I clocked this one in about 1:40, Trevor, but I just had a ton of fun doing it, so it's gonna be more than 70 seconds.
All right. I'll go 90.
Yeah. Let's pull this up.
Depends on how much ad-libbing you throw in here.
Yeah, no, that's the problem. James shows why you can't trust a Swiss banker and meets the aptly named Cigar Girl before hopping out the window and taking mad money to MI6, where M and old uni buddy Sir Robert King are waiting. Due to reasons, when King touches his money, it explodes and blows a hole in MI6. Bond steals Q's fishing boat and chases after a returned cigar girl before they get in a hot air balloon and Bond falls on the Millennium Dome. Bond hurt his shoulder, but sexes it away for a clean bill of health, and we are introduced to Elektra, King's daughter who had been kidnapped by terror baddie Renard, who was shot in the head but didn't die, but is slowly dying, but not before he becomes immune to all pain and senses, and yeah, just generally everything. Afterwards, we are introduced to R, and Q is given a really lovely and unintentional goodbye with Bond. Bond and Elektra don't get along, but then sleep together for reasons after going to old pal Valentine's casino. Afterwards, Bond meets Dr. Christmas Jones, and goes face to face with Renard, where he refuses to kill him despite saying how excited he is to kill him repeatedly. Things go boom, the film sort of muddles along. Elektra is bad and kidnaps M. Bond fakes his and Dr. Christmas Jones' death for no particular reason. Valentine's caviar factory gets diced up. We go to Istanbul. Elektra says Bond won't kill her a lot, with no real proof for that, and Bond does in fact kill Elektra, and is sad. M is rescued, and then Bond rescues Dr. Christmas Jones on a Russian sub before a nonsense fight with Renard where nothing's explained before Bond impales Renard with a bad gold tube. Finally, Bond realizes he was mistaken for thinking Christmas only came once a year.
I cut you off there prematurely because I missed that last line. But I would say that was about 111 seconds, about a minute 50.
Yeah. Trevor, how many people were killed?
Over the course of this film, these counts come from, as often is the case, alloutabubblegum.com, body count breakdown by AshPD24. I will point out that there was at least one that they had like misattributed that I went in and corrected. But there are total tally of 70 kills over the course of the film.
God. Yeah.
James Bond has 27 of them. One of the ones that they had misattributed was they counted the snipe in the opening sequence, the sniper bullet that comes through and kills the bodyguard. They gave that to Cigar Girl, but Reynard says later in the film that was him doing that. So I corrected that. So the other kills that we have, so we have Bond with 27, Giulietta Da Vinci, aka Cigar Girl, has 8 kills. Bullion or Bull or Goldie has 7. Zokas, aka Renard, has 5. Valentine has 4. Gabor has 2, and Electric King has 1. So of those 27 that James Bond has, Logan, how many of them are named primary characters?
He kills Renard. He kills Elektra. He doesn't kill Bull. He doesn't kill Cigar Girl. Who I don't even know. I mean, I guess technically that's her name. But and then beyond that, he doesn't kill Elektra's bodyguard. Oh, wait, he does kill Elektra's bodyguard, who's like Davidos. So that would be 1. He doesn't kill Gamor because no. Valentine kills Gamora. Ooh. It's either 3 or 4. It's a question of whether or not he kills Gamora. So I'm going to say I'm going to say 4. I'm going to say he does kill Gamora.
It's Gabor, but yes, it's 4. He shoots Davidov early in the film.
That's the one that almost got me.
He shoots Gabor, then he basically almost immediately shoots Elektra, and then he impales Renard with a nuclear rod at the end
with magic.
With a pressurized thing that we didn't know was a thing that could happen.
They don't explain it at all.
Nope.
Can I give a shout out to Gabor because he is an Australian Fijian actor, and in our version of Gladiators, I guess it was called American Gladiators over there. He was a character called Vulcan and was very big in the 90s for that over here. So I was
Oh,
like,
okay. Well, that's a fun
Vulcan's
fact.
in the new Bond movie. And he
That's a
doesn't
very
say
fun
anything.
Nope. he's just there to look bad.
Just looks big and like puts his hand on like M's shoulder, I think, at one point, and it's like a monstrous hand.
He's a
now he's
Hulk
a
of a
pro
man
wrestler.
for sure.
Yeah. Or he's been a pro wrestler teacher or trainer or something. Yeah.
Yeah, when I looked at his IMDb, he definitely has like a singlet on in his like IMDb photo. I think
I saw that as well.
So it's very much like, I was like, oh, that definitely gives like pro wrestler vibes. Makes sense.
Yeah, that's really funny.
I was definitely hoping that like I was hoping you were going to forget at least one of them, one of her two henchmen, because they're named and she refers to them by name multiple times, but they're like such non-entities that I was like, he's going to forget these guys.
Yeah, it was very easy to forget that. So 14 right, 5 wrong for how many killed. That takes us to, let's run through the film here. Jono, what did you think of The World Is Not Enough?
The movie or the song?
The movie. The song will come later on.
Okay.
But the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a mess. It's a bit of a jumping all over the world mess, and like watching it now as a mature adult, I'm like, man, there is a lot of like teenage sex puns in this film.
Yeah.
And the fact that they kind of cast Denise Richards in this, and Trevor said before, like, why are they appealing to 13, 14-year-olds? This movie made more money than any Bond up to this point, so I can actually see why they did that. But like the amount of sex jokes in this movie and double entendres, it's like they're high school kids, and Bond is like trying to get it into every sentence. And I even like the Bond's known for this stuff, but you guys got to tell me as you're doing this rewatch, was this worse than other films for that kind of thing? Because it just seems like constant. It's
really interesting. Like watching this movie with the benefit of having just watched GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies, and I assume you'll agree, Trev, that this is such a different tone. I think like this feels way more like the Roger Moore era Bond movies. In terms of like the one-liners and like the jokes and everything, like just the pre-title sequence alone in the banker's office where they have to make some sort of banking or financial related joke in every single line they're saying, but just like, what are we doing right now, guys? Like, I don't need any of this like jokes. Like, it was so strange because GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies are, again, kind of continued what like Timothy Dalton's two movies did in terms of being way more serious and like straight-laced and like not really doing a lot of like jokey, kind of gaggy one-liner things. And then this sort of was like, all right, we have to make up for 4 movies worth of that and throw them all in here, right? And like all the gags with Christmas, and it is such a it is just a Roger Moore era movie in a lot of ways in terms of that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was very jarring.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was gonna say as well. Is like the last couple like had a few little quips and one-liners here and there, but this one was much more akin to those Roger Moore eras where like every other line was just a very flippant thing or like hypersexualizing just every female character in the film. And it doesn't help that like, he's immediately making passes at Cigar Girl. He has this whole like wild ethical violation with his doctor. And then like all, and then also the like uncomfortable level of the stuff with Electra King, who like we're introduced to with this whole backstory of like trauma and having been kidnapped at a young age and like sexual, like alluded sexual assaults and stuff like that. It's like, oh, this is not a person that Bond should like try and sleep with. And like, I appreciate that he resists initially, but then just like they go full Bond with it and hook them up. It's a rough one.
I have to add to that. I have to add, like, is there not a Monica Lewinsky reference as well with with Moneypenny? He gives her the cigar and she says,
what that is probably referencing. You're totally right. I had never got that reference until right now. Yeah, you're actually. I bet you that's what it is. Yeah.
She gets the cigar and she says, "I know what to do with this." Which is I thought a reference to the Clinton Lewinsky scandal.
You're probably right, actually. That never rang a bell for me until right now. Holy shit. Yeah, you're probably right.
And then it's like she throws it in the bin, which is like the punchline. Instead of,
It was definitely like I feel like it's weird watching it now all these years later, because I feel like there's just already like a sexual tension to that. But yeah, in that era, in that moment, it was probably much more overtly referencing the monocle. Because I like, even when it got introduced, I was like, are they gonna make a Bill Clinton joke kind of thing? And yeah, I guess it was more subtle than I was anticipating it to be, given how overt they are with so many other things. But yeah,
it's interesting too, because Elektra is obviously such a huge part of this movie, right? And I think mostly for the benefit of the movie, but her and Bond's relationship is really strange to me, where like, yeah, it is Bond resistant and like deliberately not getting close and having kind of a different bond with her. And they go to the casino, and it is very much like they're walking out. And it is, at this point in time, there's been like no real, like, to me, scene of like, they're going to end up in bed the next time we see them, right? And the movie cuts, shows you something else of like another scene happening with like Renard's men, and then cuts back and they're in bed together. And it's like, I feel like I missed a scene where like she convinced him to like sleep with her, right? There's just like nothing there. And so when we got to that scene in the movie now, I was like, oh, this is way more jarring than I remember it being, especially with how much he was trying to like not sleep with her. Like it's a weird arc.
Has he ever slept with 3 women in one film? Is that normal?
Does he sleep with? Oh, he sleeps with the doctor too, doesn't he?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't uncommon in the later Connery era, like that. So much so that was like the formula was. There was like the first Bond girl, and then he would sleep with the bad Bond woman, and then he would sleep with like his companion, his character that's the Bond girl that's going to be with him for the rest of the film or whatever. And so it was like in You Only Live Twice, Roald Dahl even kind of talked about like he had to fit to that formula, and so like one of them just comes out of nowhere and stuff, and it's weird.
It's super jarring. Yeah, but like in more modern times, no, right? Like starting with like the Timothy Dalton movies, he basically had like the Bond girl was the only one he slept with, and that continued for the first 2 Pierce Brosnan ones. Like in Tomorrow Never Dies, he sleeps with a like language tutor, but that is like a blink and you miss it moment, and that's it. Otherwise, it's just like Paris and Waylon. But
which would still be well.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
do we see Waylon? I don't remember.
Technically, no. It's just them like making out, but I think the like illusion is obviously
it's implied.
But yeah, I mean, this is definitely the highest sex count we've had in a Bond movie since probably like the earlier Roger Moore era, because the later ones he just couldn't. But yeah, I mean, it's a weird movie. I think you're totally accurate on that, John. I think it is sort of all over the place, and
there might be too many characters too.
There are too many characters. I mean, like the elephant in the room obviously is Denise Richards' character, who for 20 years I was like, yeah, she's not good in the movie, obviously. And then watching it again now, it's like, yeah, she's still not good in the movie. But what I was surprised at was how completely unnecessary her character is. Like her character feels like she exists just so that there can be a good Bond girl for Bond to have, right? Because like it is Elektra King and Bond for like this entire movie, and then she gets introduced pretty late into the film. And then even then, she and Bond don't actually have that many scenes together. She doesn't have like that much to do after they like introduce that she's a nuclear physicist, right? Like she is just kind of there. And then like I had sort of remembered her having a bigger role that she played in like the submarine like sequence, and like she had like defused a bomb, but she doesn't. She's just like there, gets knocked down, and then just kind of they escape, and it's like, all right, like it does just end.
She's in a white tank top in a flooding submarine
water section,
again, just targeting all of the kids who'd been playing GoldenEye for the last 2 or 3 years.
It like to me it just smacks of
there's definitely like overt Tomb Raider allusions. Her introduction is she's wearing that like green tank and shorts.
Lara Croft. Yeah, like to me it just kind of reeks of they just didn't feel confident enough to have the only Bond girl in the movie be the bad person, like the bad guy of the movie, right? And so like we can't do that, so we have to like kind of balance it out, right? And it just is Denise Richards' its character is a mess.
I remember I made the note that I made it an hour into the movie almost before she pops up, and for like a good 55 minutes of that, I was like I had blissfully forgotten that she was going to be in this movie.
She's in this movie, right?
And then,
yeah, it's really easy.
And then like right before she comes, I'm like, oh no, here it comes, isn't it? And then she pops up, and I'm like, yeah,
it is, and it's like not really her fault. They give the character nothing to do, and she's poorly written. But it is, she is. Every time she's on screen, it is like the opposite of Pierce Brosnan and Sophie Marceau, where like they have excellent chemistry. I think they just have really great scenes together, and it's like some of the best stuff in the movie. Even if the arc can be weird at times, like their individual scenes and chemistry is great. And like Pierce Brosnan and Denise Richards do not have great chemistry together. They're essentially talking to two planks of wood, and it just kind of always grinds things to a halt. I don't know, Jono, did you like Denise Richards more than me and Trevor did?
No, not at all. It just seems like it's not to say that attractive people can't be scientists. That's not true.
Sure.
But it's like,
Obviously.
come on, like this is Denise Richards. Like we know her. Like it's kind of like the Tom Holland, Nathan Drake thing. Like sure, but like we know Tom Holland as this thing, and it just feels wrong. Like there's something about Denise Richards as a nuclear scientist that just feels wrong.
Right.
So that's how I interpreted it.
I don't even necessarily think of it in that context of she's just not a good actress. Like she's in over her head, like a lot of the earlier like Bond female leads were. So much so that most of the early ones got like dubbed and wow. Like were cast solely for their looks, and like acting was a distant like fifth in the things that Albert Broccoli was looking for out of these women. So like I think Denise Richards was like enough of a known quantity that they couldn't just dub over her. But it's still like that vein of she was cast for a specific thing, and the writing certainly doesn't help support her in any way. It's very terrible writing and whatnot. But like I think you could have absolutely brought in like a beautiful woman to kind of play that subversion, but this movie isn't like interested in trying to play that subversion. Really.
I think it's unfortunate for Denise Richards, where like I think she's a little bit of a victim of the time in which the movie came out, right? Because the two Bond movies before this each had, really the four Bond movies before this, the Timothy Dalton's two and Pierce Brosnan's first two all had really great Bond girls, right? Like Kara's great in Living Daylights, Pam's great in License to Kill, Natalia's great in GoldenEye, and Waylon is great in Tomorrow Never Dies, right? And so like she's surrounded by so many other great female leads before this, and then Halle Berry after this, obviously. And then even in her own movie, she's not the best female lead, right? Like arguably she's at best the third, because Judi Dench is also great in this movie, and she gets a more like fleshed out role. And so just the thing of like she is just like the victim of so many great female characters either before her or after her or in her own movie, that like anytime it is on her, it is just like, she is just out of her depth compared to everyone else around her.
Yeah. It's really the kind of thing where like a nuclear scientist should be essential to the plot if they're going to be in there. But instead it's like, here's this genius, let's make her the damsel in distress that needs to be saved, and doesn't really, like she's there to defuse the bomb in the pipe, whatever the hell was happening there. And then it was Bond that was like, no, don't do it. So like she doesn't even really do anything. And then she's in the submarine and he's like, press the button when the light turns red. So it's like, okie dokie. It could have been like you think about like Temple of Doom where he's got Willie there, who was a nightclub singer. Like she had no qualification to be in that scenario. It could have just literally been some random bimbo with the same effect.
It is, it's really unfortunate, and you sort of hit the head on the nail for me, where after the like pipeline sequence, there's no real reason for her to continue doing everything, right? Like she is just sort of there because now they're stuck together and he just can't leave her. But like it is just sort of like, all right, well, like we've done everything with your character, and so you're just going to kind of follow along after this point.
I mean, I would argue that like the script at least gives a reason for her to be there. It's a thing of plutonium, a weapons grade plutonium. Only half of it was in that pipeline thing. She diffused that. She didn't diffuse like the rest of the bomb, so it still explodes. But she diffused it from being a nuclear explosion,
Mhm.
and it's only half, so they need to figure out where the other half is. And she, as an expert, can kind of help with that. But I don't think they
There's
do
no
a
payoff
great
on that,
job
right?
of,
Yeah.
of really like relaying that or conveying that kind of stuff, because she basically says like you need a like it's going to have a locator card or something, and that's already been taken out obviously.
Yeah.
That end up getting used for M, but like she like Denise Richards isn't the one finding that. Valentine is, and Valentine has the connection to know that like his cousin's sub or his nephew's sub or whatever it is going to be like the kind of the final place. So yeah, they don't do and then like by the time they actually get to the sub, stuff's pretty much already like outside of her control to be able to stop anything anyway. So yeah, she just gets in a wet t-shirt and pushes a button to like let Bond back in. And that's about it.
I did really like that you kind of touched on it, that like Valentine's nephew is the exact same age as Robbie Coltrane, very clearly. Like it is just like a 45-year-old man. It's like, I don't know, you have an awfully old nephew there. Like they didn't even try to make him look like a younger person. But yeah, I mean, like doubling back to Judi Dench, like I like all the M stuff in the movie. Like I liked that they gave her more to do, and I think pretty much most of what she's given in this movie is really great stuff, right? Like I like her scenes with Elektra. I like her scene with Robert King and Bond kind of in the office. And the fact that they kind of took her out, had her get captured, showed that she like can kind of hold her own by like grabbing the like alarm clock and like taking the battery out to like turn on the locator to show where she's at. Like I liked all of those elements of Eamon, given this movie easily the biggest kind of role Eamon has had up to this point in the series.
Yeah, she was cool. We should talk about the action scenes at some point. Like, tell me as people who have been watching these, was this just way out there in terms of defying physics, or is that just a constant through the recent films before this? Because there were so many times that I was like almost laughing at how ridiculous some of those stunts were. Like he jumps out of the building in the opening scene with something that comes out of the curtain, and it's like effectively a bungee cord. Like there's no like harm to him, or no like jolt as he hits the ground at all. It's just like smoothest landing of all time with this household item that apparently is in every office space.
Yeah, I mean, like that sequence feels to me like they're doing the fire hose sequence from Die Hard, just with like whatever they could find, around the set kind of thing. So it's like I'm not bothered by that so much as the fact that it goes from that into a boat chase, into a balloon chase, and it is like, yeah, there's way too much packed into this like pre-credit sequence, and like none of it's really good on it. Like no element is good on its own, and when you throw them all together, it's just like, none of this was good. You've just wasted a lot of my time.
Yeah, when he fell from the balloon and landed on the Millennium Dome and just rolled off it, I was like, that's probably like a 8 to 12 week injury in the real world at least.
Yeah. He's got a banged up shoulder. Come on.
Yeah, I like that they reference his shoulder, but it didn't really seem to hold him back, except for when he was fighting and they just exploited the injury.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned this too, because I think the action scenes are actually a great example of this film being really confused and muddled, right? Like Michael Apted was famously, told Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson that like he doesn't really have that much experience with action scenes, and they said, don't worry, the second unit team will handle that, or like they'll handle those scenes. And it feels very much like almost two different movies at times, where you watch like the action scenes and you cut to like these really more serious, dramatic moments, and then like here's a random action scene that isn't really connected to anything around us, right? Like the entire, like for me, the pre-title sequence I largely like. I think it's fun. Like there is like some sort of reason behind it. The one that is just like, oh, we need an action scene is like the entire shit at Valentine's Caviar Factory. It's just like, all right, like let's destroy this in the most extravagant way possible with like spinning bladed helicopter shit.
But at least they introduced that earlier in the film, and even when they introduced the buzzsaw helicopter, I was like, oh, that's gonna come back. I don't remember how it comes back, but I know it's gonna come back. And so when it did, the one that actually gets me, and you asking specifically about like just physics defying nonsense, Jono, is all of like the snowmobile stuff. One in particular where like the snowmobile lands and then like drives off a cliff, and Bond thinks, you know, he won the day there, and then the snowmobile like deploys a second parachute, and Bond somehow beats it down to the ground, and is able to like engage with it again, and like he uses his skis to cut the parachute, and crashed into another. It's just like, none of that makes any kind of like logic or sense with any of placement or anything. It's like, no, like in order to get down there before that thing Bond would have died. Bond would have had to like jump off the cliff and just died to beat that thing down. So it's like,
I love it.
None of that was.
He hits the chute.
Yeah,
he hits the chute with his skis, and it doesn't disrupt his like trajectory at all, or his like balance or anything. He's just like, just nicked it and then lands perfectly.
I had actually completely forgotten that sequence.
I mean, it is a largely forgettable sequence. The only reason I brought it up was because I had taken a mental note at the time of like, well, that's just stupid. But I probably would have like just completely let it slide until John brought that idea up.
The great usage of John Cleese's little snowsuit popper thing.
Yeah.
So we get to pay off on that bit.
The bubble suit and Bond treating Elektra's PTSD the absolute wrong way. Basically like shaking her and being like, calm down. Yeah. Like, you're going to be okay. No, you just got buried in an avalanche. Like, she's having a perfully rational...
And she's in a bubble suit now. Yeah, it's a little bit of... A lot of stuff just happened here. She was just trying to be killed.
Convenient that they were able to, like, reconnect right in time to be captured in that tiny bubble suit.
Yeah, obviously, He had his eye on her the whole time. Don't worry.
Yeah. He sent her off a completely different direction at the beginning of that chase, and then somehow they linked back up at the end. Even though he did have to, jump off a cliff to go get that other snowmobile.
Right.
That scene in general. That scene in general, I had like an issue with as well, where Bond was sent there to protect her, right?
Yeah.
And like usually, if one of my parents was murdered and I was being protected, I would probably hang out at home or somewhere safe. And she just goes out on this tour of the pipeline, like in broad daylight,
without her bodyguards that she pays to protect her.
Right. It's again, what's the point of living if you can't feel alive, right? Like you gotta live life on the edge.
I mean, like at least to like her credit / the story's credit, she knows she's safe because even these attackers are on her payroll, and they're like, they're like they wouldn't break cover or whatever and actually kill her.
So they're just trying to kill Bond, like
I guess.
I mean, they're ostensibly they're there to sabotage the pipeline, and Bond kind of messes that up.
Classic
the last
Bond.
Physics thing that I wanted to mention was, I'm no scientific expert, but I'm pretty sure if you exit a submarine deep below the ocean, wouldn't the pressure, I don't know, like holding your breath, wouldn't it be like really hard to swim underwater for what I timed to be like 1 minute and 10 seconds?
They do at least call out that like when you surface, be sure to exhale because if you didn't, you would kill yourself. So at least they call it out, but it's wonky in their underwater stuff. They've done that before in other underwater Bond sequences, and it's just like whatever. At least this time they called out that you shouldn't be holding your breath as you try and surface.
I would be dead in 5 seconds.
Yeah, it's the whole submarine sequence in general is is sort of like the movie personified, where like there's like a really cool idea here, and then it's like a really muddled execution. I think like there definitely is a compelling, engaging, fun submarine fight between Bond and Renard somewhere in this movie. It's just not actually in the final cut, because like in the final cut, yeah, it's like like nothing is being explained to me. Like I don't understand what Renard is doing. I don't understand what the gold tube is. I don't understand like what like how Bond magically knows like what this magic wire that just got popped off does and what it's gonna do. Like it is all just a very like weird fight sequence to kind of close the movie out.
I mean, if anything, the one thing we're told is that if that gold tube goes in, the reactor is going to overheat or like and melt down and explode.
Up,
and it happens. And
nothing,
then he has plenty of time to get to that hose, like reattach it and somehow like eject the fuel rod back out. It's like, what? None of
Which
that.
seems like a weird feature to design, because he like hit a button to like pick that particular. I'm like, why would you want that as a feature in your submarine?
Yeah.
I thought that it was kind of cool the way that the submarine turned vertical and people were falling. Like that's a cool set piece and a cool idea. Yeah, and I was going to say, speaking of Inception, like under a director like Christopher Nolan, that could have been a really spectacular set piece. But instead, it was kind of like the camera was in a weird place, and it felt like they were actually filming it inside a submarine, because they didn't have any room to show like the length and size of the place. So it just felt kind of claustrophobic, and like they didn't really have room to play with.
Yeah,
I'm really
Even that, like the physics of the submarine in that sequence, I'm like, I don't understand. Like by this point, we're kind of we've been like told or shown that the submarine is basically just like vertical, and so that's why like they're fighting between the walls. But then if you like put that in like reorient the sub, it's like, so they would have been like sticking the fuel rod in the floor. Now I'm even more confused, because then that button just pops it out. It's like
way up in the air. Yeah.
What how does any of this work? What was the actual design of this? And so maybe that's the thing, is like if they had shown us like how this room worked in a normal before, like as you know, if we'd seen this weird random scene with Valentine's cousin earlier, or nephew
doing a tour inspection,
or like like bringing the sub into dock or whatever, and seeing like those elements, then maybe. But instead we just get this weird like, I don't understand how any of this layout works anyway, so I can't really follow along what we're supposed to be seeing here.
I'm really glad you mentioned the camera too, Jono, because that, to me, like the camera placement in so many of the submarine sequence is, I think, truly like terrible. Like it, like especially for like the Renard and Bond fight in like that really confined space. Like they have it almost like either above them, like looking through pipes to see the fight, or like at an angle below them, again, looking through pipes. And it's like, I just want a clear shot of the protagonist and antagonist of this entire film fighting each other. And like, I am being obstructed in that view. So like, so much so that like when, Bond and Renard are like choking each other, and Bond says like, Electra is dead, and then Renard goes on a rampage, that's ruined, because when he knocks Bond down, there's like two pipes basically blocking Pierce Brosnan. And I'm like, well, I can't see what's happening to James Bond right now very clearly. Like, it's just such a weird decision. They didn't just like move the camera to like center on the two actors. Like they try to like make it be like this more claustrophobic thing, but like in doing so, I'm just left annoyed because I can't see clearly what's going on in the like climax of the film.
Did you guys hate or love the bizarre torture chair that
Oh, it's great. I love it. It's so
it's another one of those like iconic things that I remembered of the movie from being a kid kind of thing, and just this horrifying idea of like a thing at your neck that is basically gonna just crack your spine, being like, well, that's terrifying. And then like Electra King basically straddling him at one point as he's like trying to gasp for air. And I remembered like the Valentine like not shooting her and
Yeah.
freeing Bond with his like last breath. It's like, I mean,
He must
that's
really hate you.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely a way to go. But yeah, like the chair, like watching it this time, I was like, the way she says like 5 turns and it'll kill you, and she turns it
Yeah.
like twice and he's like already almost dying. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know how there's how you still have like, because they say like one final screw again as like a double entendre. But I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure the amount that you've said he still has would just like punch through him, like his it would
His
just
head would be on the floor.
yeah, his neck would have been broken 1 turn later, and then the 2 more that you do, yeah, he's just gonna be gone. His head will have popped off.
It's a great like idea though. I think it's such a cool like torture idea for Bond, to like have, and gives us a great like scene between him and Elektra and like classic Pierce Brosnan injured faces galore, and like it's like such a great like that is one of those like most burned in my mind from the Pierce Brosnan era is that entire chair torture sequence. Like it is like, man, if that had existed in 20 years later in 19 instead of 1999, like so memeable, so gifable, so like there's so much there from like Elektra straddling him, the like screws, like it's all great stuff. Valentine, like that sequence I liked a lot. The then subsequent like Looney Tune like staircase chase I maybe needed less, but I thought the torture chair was really really great. And I did just like
pointed
Bond,
it out in your recap. I was going to say, Logan, you pointed out how she doesn't think that he'll kill her.
She says it multiple times.
After that torture scene, how could you not think he's going to kill me the first
chance he gets? Like,
and he does,
such a weird thing.
And then he's so sad about it. He's like,
yeah,
caresses her hair. I think he just had a soft spot for her, because even when he was like in MI6 looking up the restricted files, like he watched this video of her and he like caressed the screen of the computer as well, as she was crying on camera or whatever it was. So he just the writers seemed to think that he would have this soft spot for her.
Yeah, I think the idea, to me at least, has always been like he is a character who, you know, I think is like a protector at his heart, right? Like he's got that kind of like feature built into him. And Elektra like immediately spots that and exploits it in like a really cool way. But I think Bond can't shake that, is sort of the idea we're supposed to go through. The issue for me is I like, again, that idea, and I like the scene of him shooting her and then like being really sad about it. I just wish there had been more build up to it, because their relationship, watching the movie now, is really strange. Where like it's sort of like he cares for her in almost like you're like a wounded bird, I need to take care of way at first. Then they just like out of nowhere have sex, and then he immediately is like, oh, she's the bad guy. No one will listen to me. She is definitely the bad guy though. So like there was only this really brief window where like he had like fallen for her, quote unquote. And so for like it to get to the end and lecture like, you won't kill me, you would never kill a woman. It's like 2 movies ago he fucking strangled a woman to death in a tree. So like I wouldn't get too carried away here. Like he definitely will kill a woman. Like and your Bond isn't that great. Like he thought you were the bad guy 40 minutes ago. Like it was like how much he kept saying like, you won't kill me. I didn't work for me.
I think from her perspective, she thinks she's invincible in that regard, because she turned Renard. She turned Renard when she was a kid, and so she thinks she has like these sexual wiles that like nobody will like. He tried to kill me. He wanted me dead. And instead I turned him to my will, just like I've turned you to my will, Mr. Bond, kind of thing. And so that like that's I think where she was coming from with that, and she's like continually drawing those kind of parallels, because by the end of the movie she's very clearly just using Renard to gain her power and whatnot. She's like, maybe there's still a love there, but it's not a lasting love if she knows she's sending him off to his death. So I like that's kind of the take I had on it, is that it is the same level of cockiness that she's had throughout, the rest of this movie. But in this case, she thinks that basically like she turned Bond to her, in the same way that she turned Renard.
I agree to that, and like I will say, I really love the idea that like throughout the entire movie, it's been that she has Stockholm syndrome, and she fell for Renard and like became bad, like the Patty Hearst shit, right, from like the 70s kind of idea. And the idea that she didn't, that she actually turned him to her side, right, and is like using him essentially as a pawn, is like such a cool reveal, and that gets shown off in the movie. Like I wish we had gotten more of it, but like that's such a cool moment of being like, oh shit, like she is actually the mastermind, and like is so much more clever than anyone thinks.
Yeah, she's actually a great character, like
Yes.
a great villain to be
Yes.
in that spot as the woman who's like, I guess, the Bond girl. Usually, from my memory at least, the Bond girl villains are more henchman like,
Yeah.
or they're a silent assassin or whatever it might be. So for her to be the mastermind, and for the guy that we thought was the big bad to be working for her, is, I don't want to give them so much credit to say it's progressive, but for a Bond movie, maybe it is. Maybe that's a good way to describe it.
Definitely, like and it's also sort of like the source of, I think, like my biggest frustration with this movie is that like I do think it's like a really cool progressive idea, especially for the time, and I also think that they like don't fully commit to it, right? Like I think they don't give her like the final climactic fight with Bond, right? They have her get killed like with 25-30 minutes of the movie left still, right? Like it's like a lot of the movie after her death, right? Like they don't fully commit to the idea of like, oh, she's the big bad. They don't fully commit to the idea of just like having her be the only Bond girl and like not having Denise Richards' character be like, I wish that like it had just been much more almost like what they did with Vesper and Casino Royale, like where it is just like she's the Bond girl. They don't get a happy ending. And she's also the big bad, right? And like that would have been a way more effective arc. What we get is still really good, and she's a great character, but like I'd have loved to see them just commit just that last little bit for me.
I definitely thought of you as watching this, Logan, because we've had that conversation so many times of the order that like Bond takes out the henchman and the big bad. And like it usually just doesn't work when he takes out the big bad first, and then there's like henchman cleanup that still needs to happen. And so this, it's taking out the big bad first, and then you've still got the henchman and Reynard to clean up afterwards.
Yeah.
Sorry, I liked that he just straight up shot her, and that was the way that he disposed of her. I thought it would have been nice from like a narrative perspective to have her kind of slowly dying and show her like shocked that he actually did all these things that he said that she was convinced he would never do.
Yeah.
That look in her eyes of realizing that she was wrong and that her life's about to be taken away. Like I like that kind of thing in a villain, like the moment that they realize it's over, and what do they say? You'll never stop rain, like whatever she's gonna say. Like I think that would have been cool, but instead it's just like bang, sniff her hair or whatever he does to her.
I agree, but I also like the fact that like it's just this moment of like Bond just kind of showing his like ruthlessness, I guess, for lack of a better word, like in a moment just like boom, like he'll do it in a second, right? Like he will be sad about it afterwards, right? Like he doesn't want to kill, in cold blood, like an unarmed person, he says earlier in the movie to Renard, but like he will do it if he has to, kind of thing. And like I liked that aspect of it. I wish he'd done it with Renard an hour ago, like he kept saying he was going to do for like 5 minutes, how excited he's to kill him. But it is nice to see him just boom, pull the trigger and it's done. And it is like such a like almost shocking moment, because I think we are so used to like these long drawn out battles or like talkathons between the two characters before one of them dies. And here it is just like, boom, like I'm not a Bond villain. Like I will just kill you and be done with it. And like, I appreciated that angle of it, I think.
Yeah. You did your monologue while I was in that torture rack.
Right.
We don't need to do that again.
Right,
I'm just going to kill you now.
Yeah, it is like a really like, and especially because it is really rare for Bond to just like kill in cold blood like that in the history of the series, like for men. And it's pretty much the only time he ever just straight up kills a woman in cold blood like that. And so like, I think it is like really powerful for that as well. And then in addition to like obviously the relationship they had, like it works. That scene in particular like works really well for me, just because it is like so sudden and quick and jarring. And then we have a 20-minute submarine fight afterwards. Jono, any final thoughts on The World's Not Enough before we get into the kind of wrap up podcast in the podcast section?
No, I think we've covered it fairly well. Christmas only comes twice a year, I guess.
I guess twice a year. Yeah, we don't really know.
Yeah.
More than once.
Trevor, sorry, I gotta say the X-ray, X-ray glasses that exclusively used to find guns and lingerie.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, I see. I love those glasses, and that's what I remember most. But like, I did enjoy him in the banker's office, like wearing glasses. And at first, I was like, oh, like that's sort of a like, Q took a holiday for that disguise, just him giving him glass like he's Clark Kent and Superman. And then I remember that like, oh wait, they're gonna be like a thing who's like set off an explosion. And I loved how like flamboyantly he is just showing them off. Like he's like taking them off, twirling them around, like tapping him on his hand before he does anything with it. I'm like, if I was in there, would be like, this dude's a fucking weirdo with his glasses. Like, just like be chill, man. Like he is so over the top with it. And like you can't help but like draw your attention to these glasses. It is a very funny bit.
Strangely tinted as well.
Yeah. Not sure what they're doing for you. Trevor, any final thing before we hop into the wrap up?
I mean, yeah, that last line of Christmas
it's awful.
Only coming once a year. Like, it was terrible then, it remains terrible now, and it is awful. Just like the epitome of like.
Yes.
And I even I joked in the in our Slack channel like talking about it, like it hides almost the egregiousness of the fact that the doctor's name is also like Dr. Molly Goodflash or something like that.
Warm
like,
Flesh, yeah.
Warm Flash, yeah. It's like she also has a very terrible name that like does not at all need to be in this movie because we don't ever refer to her by like that or
you only
or
ever call her Molly,
like or maybe Moneypenny refers to her by name like once or something like that. But it's like, oh, that's a terrible one in the same way as like it wasn't Holly Goodhead or something like that, but it was
It was Holly Goodhead.
Was it Goodhead in
that was her name in Moonraker, Holly Goodhead.
Okay, yeah. So it's just terrible, and here it's Christmas Jones, and like Bond just
you know that they
names.
Named her. Like I've never met or seen anyone named Christmas. They came up with that character name just for that final line.
They came up with the line. They came up with the joke, and then we're like, we have to figure out how to make this work. Like I always enjoyed that line because that's another classic one where again I watched these movies when I was like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like. And, like, I knew that was a, like, pun or a joke, but I had no idea what that was referencing. As a kid, I was like, and like...
Me too.
I very vividly remember thinking as a child, like, it does. And I was like, does it come more than that? And I was like, I don't understand. Like, it does only come once a year, right? And, like, I didn't get it for years. And it was, like, that same relationship I had of, like, how the hell did they get away with pussy galore? How the hell did they get away with, like, some of the, like, lines and jokes they make? And, I thought Christmas only came once a year. I was like, that's filthy shit. Like, I was like, how did they get away with this shit? Like, once I, like, realized as I got older, like, oh my God, they were just, like, throwing out shit here. Fantastic, then. Let's get into the wrap-up podcast and then podcast section. First up, we've got Villains Corner. As you can see, we have lots of villains and baddies here. I'm going to assume we're going to nominate both Renard and Elektra for placement on this list. John, I will go with you. How did you like Renard's character within this movie?
Like Trevor was saying before, the concept of the character, thought it was really cool as a kid. Less cool now. I think it's been done a lot. Like, I don't know if it's been done a lot since this or just I didn't know about those other characters. Right. At the time, but it's certainly definitely one of those things you'll find if you search this movie on TV tropes. It'll be like named and have a lot of different examples of it. The villain that can't feel pain, but the fact that they went there with the bullet in the brain. Love it.
It's great.
It's just not the execution and the personality of that character wasn't really there. I did like him getting extra angry when Bond kind of tells him that Elektra's gone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But other than that, he was kind of like, didn't really quite live up to the potential. So I thought Elektra was better, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're going to rank them, then I'd have her higher than him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think... Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you for Renard, right? Like, I think the idea, and I remember the idea of being really cool of, like, this person who can't feel pain or feel any sensation, right? Like, can't feel ice or anything, smashes a fucking, like, chest. Like, that's a really cool idea. I just think they weirdly don't utilize that a lot, right? Like, really the only sequence we get of him not feeling things is in bed with Elektra and then smashing the chest. There's not a moment in, like... I sort of would have wanted them to, like, have a scene of, like, Bond shoots him or, like, breaks his arm or, like, does something, and it's like, that does nothing. I'm a Terminator. That does nothing to me, right? And instead it's just like, I don't feel sex anymore. And it's like, I mean, I'm sorry for you, but, like, I don't, that's like a weird, okay, sure, I guess. And, like, there's no other payoff of it.
There's way more downsides to not feeling anything than upsides, I have to say. Like, his body would be a mess because he wouldn't even be able he wouldn't even be able to tell when, like, you know, if you get pins and needles or something, like, imagine that sensation constly,
or like burn your mouth.
I mean, you don't, you don't know when, like, you need to use the restroom, or like when your bladder is full, or there's a whole
just
bunch.
Just a timer for like every 2 hours, be like, I guess, I mean, just see what happens.
Yeah.
Even if you're sitting like a little too close to a heater or something, it would just like burn your leg, and you would have like no idea that your flesh is on fire.
Yeah, I think that's. Like, the first time that Bond and Renard meet would have been a perfect opportunity to showcase that. Like, Bond does shoot him, and it doesn't do anything. And Renard keeps going or something like that. And we just don't get that. The weirdly, the, like, meanest thing that happens to him in that regard is Elektra basically, like, taunting him with the fact that that he feels nothing when they're together. It's like, well,
does he put his hand through glass at some point as well?
Yeah. That's in that scene. He just smashes like a glass chest, and she puts ice on it. And I was like, all right.
Yeah, and I guess like she tries to basically she tries to be sexual with the ice on herself, to say like, but do you feel this kind of thing? And like, even that, no, he doesn't really feel anything. And so it's just like, you're just being mean to him.
It's like
this condition he has.
If that man just smashed a glass chest and didn't feel that, no, I don't think he's going to feel the ice on your skin. I don't think he'll feel that. That doesn't seem to connect there, Elektra.
Add up.
I mean, in terms of like looking at our list. In terms of Renard, I mean, I'm looking like above Brad Whitaker, Trevor below Oddjob is sort of where I would put Renard.
Oh, I was gonna put him lower. I was gonna put him below like Largo or something.
Ooh,
okay. I like the idea of him.
Okay, yeah, let's
more than the execution.
Let's do it. Absolutely, I love a good hot take. And then that takes us to Elektra. Trevor, where are you thinking on Elektra here?
I don't know, because like I do really like a lot of elements of her, and then there are just others where I'm just like they shortcutted it, or they didn't, they could, or they pulled punches or something like that. So it's I don't know, maybe above Scaramanga,
below Dario.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Where are you?
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, actually. That's like I think a pretty solid spot. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
People that don't know the list as intimately as these guys, that's Elektra about a third of the way down, and Renard about a third of the way up from the bottom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll run through the top. We'll run to Elektra right now. Right. So we've got Alec Trevelyan from GoldenEye number 1, Franz Sanchez number 2, Art Goldfinger number 3. Anna Top from GoldenEye number 4, Jono Koskoff from Living Daylights 5, Max Zorin, played by a wonderful Christopher Walken 6, Dario 7, and then Elektra is 8.
Dario played by Benicio del Toro.
Yes, a 21-year-old babyface Benicio del Toro. Electra at 8, and then Scaramanga and Blowfield 2.0 round out the top 10 there. That's a solid list there, I would say so myself. Hopping over from there, it takes us to those musical moments. Now, Jono, please tell me what you thought of The World Is Not Enough by Garbage.
I really like that song.
Yeah.
It's one that, despite, I don't know how many times I've seen this movie, maybe 3 times. The first being at release, the most recent one being this week. But I would still be able to hum or sing like the title, like "The World Is Not."
Yeah.
I just remember that from my original experience, so it's stuck with me. It's not like I listened to the CD or anything. So for that alone, I'd say it's one of the good ones that sticks with you. The verses and stuff are kind of just par for the course of like, this is a Bond theme. This is a Bond theme. This is a Bond theme. And here's the chorus.
Yeah.
So not on Snake Eater level, but still very good for me.
We're in the era of Bond themes that really started probably with Tomorrow Never Dies before this, right? Where they had Sheryl Crow do Tomorrow Never Dies. They had Garbage do this one. Madonna does the next one, right? Like, I know that Jack White and Alicia Keys are going to do one down the line. Like, we're in like a very eclectic era where like they're all going to sound different, right? And I will usually prefer that, even if they're not great, to a lot of the ones in the 70s and 80s, which are just them doing, a parody of a Shirley Bassey theme from the 60s, right? Like, it's just like, but never as well. And so like, I sort of enjoy these ones just because they are like so, at least a little bit different.
I mean, which one was the first one where I felt like, or for me at least, where I felt like they were chasing like the mainstream audience? Like, obviously,
Duran Duran.
Yeah, it is Duran Duran.
Yeah.
Obviously, we had the Paul McCartney "Live and Let Die" earlier than that, and Nobody Does It Better. But like, I think Duran Duran was like the first one where they were like really trying to like hit a target audience, and then like, yeah, even this, like, Garbage is a band I would not have thought about. Like, I've not thought about Garbage in 20 years.
Yeah,
and then they come up in this. I'm like, oh, like they hit at the right time to get a Bond song. Yeah, I guess.
All I can tell you about Garbage is they did the song from The World's Not Enough, and they did the song from Big Daddy.
Yeah.
Oh
like,
my god, that's
the one
right.
I mean, and I double checked, but like, I'm Only Happy When It Rains is like the Garbage song that I think of. And even Big that Daddy is like, yeah, it's a song I've not thought of in a couple decades.
What a great pull, Jono. Yeah. Big
Daddy was the year after this.
Yeah.
When I grew up. Yeah.
They had their 2-year run. I put it above Tomorrow Never Dies because I like it more than Sheryl Crow's Tomorrow Never Dies. But I still think we've only had at this point in time 4 great Bond themes, to be clear. Which is essentially Live and Let Die, Spy Who Loved Me, Goldfinger, Goldeneye. And then a lot of stuff that's fine. In terms of the QLab gadgets, that's from last week. We got a fun little sequence in the QLab, kind of one last time with Desmond Llewellyn.
Real quick before hopping into the QLab, I want to shout out because like obviously it was never like its own dedicated theme, but like the Bond theme, like I do appreciate still when that pops up in a movie, like and I think especially in this Brosnan era, they've done a fun job of like hitting certain layers of that theme for certain sequences and stuff of like, okay, Bond's getting in the car and the music kicks in and we're about to get like a Bond car action moment. And so I would put that in as like an honorary somewhere in here, and that like it would be a top 5 for me.
Sure. The James Bond, as he shoots like the canister and goes up and the Bond theme kicks in this movie, is never not going to be great. It's all like it just hits so well. One
of my favorite moments too is I think it fits in with this, but in the opening fight chase, one of my favorite Bond moments ever is when he adjusts his tie underwater.
Oh, underwater
in the boat, and I'm like, that is such a Bond. Like no
And
other
yeah.
character would do that in any movie and have the same, like it wouldn't be a part of their character, but it just is. And that was a Pierce Brosnan
improv
idea from according to the IMDb trivia. So I love that, and I think it's a musical moment as well.
Yeah, it is. It is great stuff, and I'm glad you brought that up, Trevor, because that was one thing I wanted to mention. I think What Is Not Enough in particular, like, really utilizes that Bond theme for like really great moments. And it's sort of one of the last ones that does, because it stays away from it a lot in the Craig era. So we only have like this in one of the movie where they really kind of have fun with it still. Yeah, it's great though. In terms of QLab, we've got obviously the little puffer jacket thing that gets utilized. It's fine. Outside of that, really the only stuff we get are the pair of glasses we've talked about. One that blows up his gun, which is a weird feature, and then one that sees guns and lingerie, as Jono described it. It is largely a kind of a lackluster thing, unless you count Q's fishing boat, in which case that's a great gadget to get, but is obviously blown to shit by the end of the chase. I just kind of wanted to also give a shout out in the QLab section to Desmond Llewellyn. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, this is his final movie after 17 films and 30 plus years with the character. He's obviously like such an integral kind of foundational part of the Bond series, I think, and kind of will forever be Q to a lot of people. And indeed, there wouldn't be another named Q character because John Cleese will be R in the next one, all the way until Skyfall, 13 years after this. So I think, yeah, he's fantastic, and I always really liked his scene in this movie in particular. Desmond Llewellyn had actually meant to come back for one more Bond movie. After this, it wasn't meant to be his last Bond movie before his passing. But with this being his last Bond movie, I think his scene with James actually works really well as a like final scene for that character, and as like a farewell. And the little wrap up he gets and kind of slowly going down, kind of unintentionally works as a great kind of final scene.
I just want to point out John Cleese is credited as Q in the next movie.
Is he?
In Die Another Day, yeah.
Well, then that's interesting to know. He's not in Agent Under... It's interesting. That's an interesting fact. Maybe they just hadn't decided about Agent Under Fire. Yeah, and Agent Under Fire, which came out the year before Die Another Day, he's still R. So maybe they just hadn't decided what they wanted to call him until Die Another Day. That's interesting. That's a fun fact. That's actually a little fun fact for you. Desmond Llewellyn is great. I love Desmond Llewellyn. And as we mentioned the last couple of weeks, I love his kind of relationship with Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan's Bonds in particular, and kind of the more paternalistic familial bond he has with those two characters in particular. I always really enjoy. Outside of that, let's rank this bad boy. Jono, you obviously don't have a review list of yourself, but I would love to hear kind of your final review and kind of final thoughts on The World Is Not Enough before me and Trevor give ours.
My final thoughts, I think it's right down the line as far as, is it a good movie? Rotten Tomatoes has it, I believe, around like 58%. So it seems half the people that watch it tend to like it and half of them don't. So if you can tolerate ridiculousness and over the top action and silly puns, then there's probably enough here to enjoy, because we've pointed out, I think, a lot of the good things that are still there despite the things that tend to dominate, I guess, the narrative about how this is remembered.
Yeah.
So it's also just very much a time capsule of what these kinds of action movies were like in the 90s, which is, I guess, what you could say about every Bond film. That's what I think a lot of people love about Bond, is that it captures the moment in Hollywood. And this certainly captures the late 90s for me. So there was a little nostalgia going back to it. There's a little,
definitely,
why is this scene in here, or why did they make this choice?
Right.
But overall, it does have that feeling of, if Die Another Day is the jumping of the shark, this is like the putting the skis on and literally and getting ready to jump the shark for some of the things that get even worse which you'll have a lot of fun talking about next episode, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, very nice. Trevor, final thoughts and rankings of The World Is Not Enough.
Yeah, I mean, of the Brosnan ones, this is easily the weakest of the
Yeah.
three we've watched so far, and the weakest one we've had in a while. Basically since the Moore era for me, easily. I still, it has enough of a modern sensibility that I would still much rather watch this, knowing that I'm gonna hate any time that Denise Richards is on the screen. I would rather watch this than pretty much anything pre-Dalton. So like in terms of like me sitting down and rewatching it again, that's where it would fall. In terms of quality, I'll end up kind of throwing it, I'll throw it below Spy Who Loved Me on my list, which puts it at like 7 or 8, basically between Spy Who Loved Me and From Russia with Love. I think it's still like, even as a bad modern era Bond, it's still leaps and bounds above some of those earlier ones we sat through for me. And I think Brosnan still at least is having a lot of fun with it, even if the writing is starting to really slip and kind of take him in a direction I wish it wouldn't. Like he's still having fun with it. There's a lot of good M stuff in this one that will, I think that is like a precursor of what we're going to get from Judi Dench in the Craig era, certainly. And Electric King is, I think, a interesting idea, and Renard is an interesting idea, even if they didn't execute as well as I would have liked on them. They're still far more interesting than so many of the Bond villains that I've completely forgotten from those first 25 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think The World Is Not Enough is a really weird movie. If that hasn't come across yet, I don't know what has for this. I think there is definitely elements that work, and there's also a lot that I think doesn't. I think I agree with Trevor that it is pretty easily the weakest since the Timothy Dalton era, right? Like the prior 4 films all, I think, really hit on a good note. And I think The World Is Not Enough is really kind of unfortunate in particular because I think this is sort of the image a lot of people have of the Pierce Brosnan era and of Pierce's Bond, this and Die Another Day. And that's really unfortunate because it is so different than GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, and his Bond is different, and the movies are different, and I think the writing is sharper, and I think the unfortunate nature of it is that, that kind of golden age of James Bond video games from like GoldenEye 64 onwards are mostly going to be dominated by games that are coming out after World Is Not Enough and are pretty much all based in their version of James Bond off of this kind of Bond who's throwing out one-liners and is quippy and witty and not kind of the other version that we had from Pierce before this. And so you play games like Agent Under Fire, Nightfire, Everything or Nothing, and you're basically getting that version of James Bond. And I think it just left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth, which is unfortunate. And I think that's partially why Pierce is, I think, an underrated and underappreciated James Bond. Because even in this movie where the writing isn't great or some of the characters might not be great, I think Pierce is still fantastic and is still pretty clearly having a ball just being a character he's wanted to be since he was a child, right? Watching Sean Connery on screen. And so like that is definitely an element of like me enjoying it. I think a little like Trevor said, I would definitely rather watch this movie than a lot of the Roger Moore era, which everyone's entitled to their opinions and, can like what they like and art is subjective and all that's totally fair. I think the Roger Moore era is still pretty rough around the edges. I think, being generous, there are 2.5 good movies out of his 7, right? And so, it's definitely better than a lot of those. Looking at my list, it's pretty clearly below Tomorrow Never Dies, License to Kill, kind of territory on a Magic Service. I I love the Connery era for the most part, so it's below a lot of those. Right? Like I sort of look more at like A View to a Kill. I think is a good kind of parallel film to kind of rate it against for me, because I think A View to a Kill is similar in sort of like, is it a good movie? I don't know. It threads the line on that, but it's pretty fun and engaging, and I think there are moments to enjoy. It's got great bits. It's very silly, like A View to a Kill. So like, I think sort of put it in that neighborhood. Like, I've gone back and forth on it a little bit. Like, ultimately, I'm probably okay right now ranking it above A View to a Kill, if only because I like Pierce more than I like Roger, right? And so kind of putting it below Dr. No and above World Is Not Enough and Thunderball on my list right now, but that could change next week depending on how I feel. But that's where I put it. So Trevor's both of our top fives actually say the same. Trevor's top five is still GoldenEye, then License to Kill, The Living Daylights, Tomorrow Never Dies, and Goldfinger. And my top five is Goldfinger, GoldenEye, Live and Let Die, The Living Daylights, and From Russia with Love. And yeah, that's it. That's the show. Thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, you can go over to youtube.com/thatnerdysite and find this YouTube only series. You should already be there. Hit the like button, hit the little subscribe button, hit the bell to get notified when a new video goes live Monday through Saturday over at thatnerdysite.com's YouTube channel, where we have all the podcasts and Let's Plays and YouTube only shows going live over there. You can also go over to thatnerdysite.com and check out all the latest reviews, features, podcasts going live on that site, as well as, of course, the written review companion piece to the show that I do for each of the movies, also housed over at thatnerdysite.com. You can go find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trev, anything that you want to plug or shout out?
No, I will defer my plug time and shout out time to Jono, our guest.
Oh, that's sweet. You can go find Jono at Jono himself on the internet. What do you want to plug and shout out?
Well, if you're listening to this, then you obviously like movies, and I've got a movie rewatch podcast called Comedy Rewind, where we look back at comedies from the 90s and 2000s. So we've had Logan over there to chat about some, including Rush Hour and Shanghai Noon and City Slickers, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future. Maybe I can get both of you over there for something that you might have in common from the 2000s. Let me know.
Yeah.
But that's always a fun time, seeing how things age in the past 20 to 30 years. Otherwise,
have you guys done Austin Powers? We could do Austin Powers.
Well, we did do the first Austin Powers, so we've got two more that we could load up, and that would actually be a really good tie-in, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It would be a fun companion to this, yeah.
Yeah, we're doing 2000s at the moment, so we might have to skip straight to Goldmember and see how that's
That's definitely one I've not thought about in many years. But, yeah.
15 years.
Yeah. So that'd be great. Otherwise, yeah, my game Trigger Witch is out now. If you're into twin stick shooters with a modern twist and lots of pixelated 16-bit blood and gore, then go play that, because it's a lot of fun. It's on all consoles, and I think it's on Steam now as well. But yeah, otherwise, that's all I'll plug for now.
There you go. Go check all of those out, including Comedy Rewind, which is a great show. You can go find me at Lefty Logie or Lefty Loggy, Loggy, on the internet. I will echo all those shout-outs. You can go find That D Plus show. You can go find That Nerdy Site show. You can go find That News You Care About. All the other great That Nerdy Site content out there. The Let's Play is going live Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Just be on the lookout for all of that. Otherwise, though, you can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site all across the web. For myself, for Trevor, for Jono, for all of us here at That Bond Show, thank you for listening. And That Bond Show will return with Die Another Day.